Good evening and welcome to our regular meeting this November 24th. You'll note that Councillor McDonnell is not with us. He's on the train working for GFA as a board member, so he sends his regrets. Call to order. Moved by Deputy Mayor Lang, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. Be it resolved that the Township of automatically, that the November 24th, 2025 council meeting of the Township of South Glengarry be opened at 6:33 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. If you could please rise for the singing of the national anthem. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, moving to the approval of the agenda. Are there any amendments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are no amendments this evening.
Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry approve the agenda as circulated. All those in favor? Carried. In the event I missed somebody with their hand up, I don't think I did for consent agenda. Nope. Okay. Approval of minutes. Were there any errors or omissions? Noted. Seeing none, moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that the minutes of the following meeting, including closed session minutes, be adopted as circulated. Previous meeting minutes, November 10th, 2025. All those in favor? Carried. We move into presentations and delegations. The first presentation is for the Glengarry Archives Heritage Designation. Please feel free to speak, and when you go, just press the gray button and speak into the microphone for the audience at home.
Good evening. My name is Ainsley Hunt. I'm the Economic Development Officer for the Township of North Glengarry. I'm here on behalf of Stephanie McRae, who's our Director of Community Services, who sends her regrets. Unfortunately, our council meetings occur at the same time, so she had to make her presentations to our council this evening. And I am joined here today by Lindsay, who is the Senior Planner with SGG Counties. So I'd first like to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak on our intent to designate the Glengarry County Archives today. I do deeply apologize for not starting this process the way that we intended to with an open discussion. The intent to include South Glengarry was there from the beginning, but it was missed on our end, and I'm appreciative of your acceptance of our delegation this evening. Pass it over to Lindsay to discuss some of the changes to the Ontario Heritage Act and why we have chosen to move forward with this designation.
All right, thank you, Ainsley. Good evening, everyone. So before we take a closer look at the Glengarry Archives, County Archives building, we wanted to give a brief overview of the legislative framework. I know it's everyone's favorite topic of discussion, the Ontario Heritage Act. So I'll be looking at some of the relevant sections, as well as take a look at some of the designation criteria and some of the recent changes that have been released by the province on this subject matter. There we go. Okay, so the Ontario Heritage Act is the provincial legislation that regulates the conservation, protection, and preservation of cultural heritage properties and districts in Ontario. In the Ontario Heritage Act, there are two common practices in which individual properties can be designated. One of them is by the minister, and the other is under Section 29, which is by municipal bylaw. So therefore, when heritage properties are being considered for designation under Section 29, each candidate property is evaluated and well-researched against the prescribed criteria in order to determine the cultural heritage value or interest in order to be considered for designation. And if you are interested in looking at some of the prescribed criteria in great detail, you may want to refer to Ontario Regulation 569. Another key component of the Ontario Heritage Act is that what it does, it actually permits municipalities to maintain a register of the properties with cultural heritage value, and oftentimes it will include properties that are both listed and designated. And over the next couple slides, I'll speak to some of the differences between the two. So some of you may be wondering, what's a listed property? What does this mean? So when making reference to a listed property, these are properties that have not gone through the designation process. They could be added if they were believed to have cultural heritage value or interest. Do keep in mind that this was before some of the recent changes to the Ontario Heritage Act, and that generally properties were listed if they were believed to have significant heritage value. These properties are not subjected to the same legal restrictions or protections. However, property owners are required to give us 60 days written notice of their intent to demolish the building or to remove it, which sometimes would trigger a very responsive designation process by the municipality. As you can imagine, designated properties have gone through the designation process, and what it does is that the bylaw specifies the various heritage attributes that are protected. So it does give further legal protection of the identified cultural heritage value or interest. Designated property owners are required sometimes to consult with the local heritage committee, and are often, or they may be required to obtain a heritage permit if they wish to alter part of the property that is protected by bylaw. These heritage bylaws, or the heritage designation bylaws, are then filed with the Ontario Heritage Trust, which is the province's heritage agency, whose responsibility is to preserve and protect the built cultural and natural heritage features across the province. So as I mentioned before, some of the designation criteria that you see here on the screen, what we've done, these are the prescribed criteria that you'll find in the Ontario regulation, and what we've done is organize them into three main categories for you this evening. So on this slide, you'll notice that, sorry, I just want to go back a little bit. So this list determines how municipalities can actually attribute value to the property, building, or structure. So on this slide, you'll see that that first category, heritage significance, can be related to the design or physical value of a building or structure on the property. Second category is that the property could have historical or associated value, meaning that it's connected to a either significant individual or organization within the community. And the third category is that the property could have contextual value, meaning that the property could be supportive of the character of an area, or be linked to its broader surroundings, or even be considered a landmark in the community. So looking at some of the recent changes, so for those of you who remember, Bill 23 was passed in the fall of 2022. Some of the changes included changes to the Ontario Heritage Act. So what occurred with Bill 23 is that it introduced some changes that affected how municipalities maintain their heritage registers, as well as implemented a very hard deadline in which that list of properties had to be reviewed by. So that list had to be completed, or so a review of that list had to be completed by January 1st of 2025. And what it also did was introduce a new threshold for which properties could be listed or designated. So that new threshold was referring back to that list of prescribed criteria. So for example, if a heritage property were to be added to a list, it now has to meet at least one criteria. And if it were to be designated, it now has to meet at least two, whereas before it was just believed to have significance. So that increase in threshold is what was introduced with Bill 23. With Bill 23, they also introduced a new time limit on how long a property could remain on the listing. So previous to these changes, a property could be listed on the register indefinitely. However, now with the new changes, once it's listed, the property has 2 years in which it needs to be designated, whether it's by bylaw or by the minister. So Bill 23 also introduced impacts by non-action by the municipalities. So if, for example, the review was not completed by the January 1st, 2025 deadline, those properties on that listing would be removed and could not be relisted for another 5 years. And this, again, with Bill 23, for the first time, it actually introduced a freeze in the designation process, which could occur in response to a prescribed event, which would be considered an application under the Planning Act for that property. Following Bill 23, in June of 2024, Bill 200 was passed, recognizing that the initial January 1st, 2025 deadline was very difficult for municipalities to work within in order to get through their long list of legacy properties, and therefore a 2-year extension was introduced with Bill 200. It's now been extended to January 1st, 2027. In addition, Bill 200 introduced clear guidelines for which properties on the heritage listing are managed by municipalities, because what resulted as a result of this hard deadline is that some municipalities were tempted to remove them off the listing and then add them back to reset that 2-year time frame. So that this bill provided clearer direction on how to handle that listing. And now I'll turn it back over to Ainsley Hunt.
So now we will speak about the property in question, the Glengarry County Archives, and how this pertains to it. So this is the current street view of the building, which we are very familiar with, but I would like to specify that what we're looking to designate is just the right portion of the building. And then we have the back of the building. And Alan McDonald did want to make note that it's the permanent home of the Glengarry Archives, as it has decades of growth available, and as more of our content becomes digital, it just provides extra room for the actual materials available inside. Again, we would only be looking at designating this portion of the building of the specific features. And this is the former rear view of the building, and something I would like to note is that it's quite clear how well the building has been preserved over time. The balanced facade still exists, the transom over the door exists, it's all still with the limestone, and the window sills are still there today. And again, another image from back then. So this is an example of what we were wanting to put in as our statement of cultural value of interest in the bylaw. But what I wanted to discuss today is who is Angus MacDonell. So he was born in 1971, and Colonel Angus MacDonell was the nephew to Bishop MacDonell of St. Raffles. He had large ownership of land in Alexandria, and his home appears on the first manuscript of North Glengarry in 1822. However, it's assumed that his home was constructed between 1820 and 1822. There's no actual record of it. Since his passing, the home was passed through many households, but in 1920 it was sold to the Knights of Columbus, where it remained in their possession for almost 100 years before it was then taken over by our municipalities. So the features we're looking to specifically designate is the balanced facade of the building, the limestone, the rectangle footprint, its hipped roof, the stone windowsills, and rather than that sentence, Alan has informed me it's called a transom above the doorway. But this is something that we are very open to discussion on, and if there's anything that you would like to address specifically, we would be happy to bring it back to our council for comments. But why do we want to designate the Glengarry Archives? As this is a project we're currently actively undertaking in our municipality, we felt that leading by example would show our faith and confidence in the heritage designation process that we are currently encouraging our property owners to undertake as well. It's an effective way to protect culture and heritage for future generations while bringing pride and value to our broader community. And designating the building is also a great representation of Glengarry's historic past and the partnerships that both of our municipalities have. And again, we thank you for your time this evening and are open to any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and we do understand that there was some change administratively during this time too, so it's understandable that sometimes these little things get missed, and we're glad that you came back. We were just, and especially with that list that you had with the 5 items, because that's essentially what we were looking for, I believe. Are there questions from members of council? Councillor Bougie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. And I mean, this is such a long history of Glengarry and then the Glengarry County Archives with Alan. We were at the high school at one point at Alele, and then we found this great building. And I know a lot of work was done to it to get it ready and to make it look like that. I don't, like in terms of the condition of the building structurally, I don't know what kind of condition it is. I don't know if you have any like info on that. But in terms of these 5 here, like the facade of limestone, I mean, it looks in great condition right currently, and as well as the other things listed here. My big concern though is I guess, as probably as many as cost. The cost to replace these materials instead of what could be replaced in the past. Now, I feel like when the work was done in the first place, it was very similar to this. So I guess it's almost like status quo. Is that correct in saying that? We've always kind of done this kind of work and tried to keep to a heritage style?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's my understanding of how this was redone, also with the intent of it being the archive building. Bringing it back to its original structure was, my understanding, the intent of this happened unfortunately before I was employed with the municipality, but that's from my understanding, yes.
Deputy Mayor Lang and then Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I think it's great. I wasn't here at the first meeting when I guess we weren't sure. I think I would have been sure. But no, I have no issue with any of the points. I think it's been restored, and I suspect that none of these things will have to be touched for many, many, many years. I would think 50+ years, and it could be longer than that. But no, I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. Thank you very much for your presentation. Couple of questions. Again, sort of piggybacking on the comment that Councillor Bougie said about cost. So if I understand this correctly, like if you are only listing those specific attributes, for example, if for some reason the Glengarry County Archives were moved to another historic building at a, again, hypothetical situation, if the new owner of that building could do whatever they wanted to the inside, like they could move the walls, they could whatever, do whatever they want, but as long as they're not changing those specific listed items, then there's not a concern. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that is correct. So the bylaw is very specific. When you go to establish the designation itself, you do need to provide a list of heritage attributes. And if, for example, changes were to be proposed for an interior renovation, for example, for a change of use, if it's not listed in those specific list of attributes, you're correct in your assessment that no, those changes could occur. It's really only that extra protection in the bylaw itself, that legal protection is only specific to whatever is listed in that bylaw.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for confirming that. And also, my other question is, if I understood you correctly, you're saying that this is an initiative that you're embarking on, I gather, beyond just this building. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about what North Glengarry is doing on that.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to speak on that. So we started this last year, and last year we designated 5 properties in the municipality. 3 of them were homes and 2 of them were churches. This year we have moved forward with designating the Alexandria train station, which received a lot of positive feedback in the community. And then there are other properties on our list that we are trying to designate by the January 1st, 2027 deadline that were originally listed in our register. So North Glengarry had a bit of a unique position where our heritage register was a lot of listed properties and only 4 designated properties, with the last designated property being in 1999. So our Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee has been taking a very active approach to our heritage designations with the great help of Lindsay here.
All right. As we don't take decisions specifically at council, we can provide some direction. I imagine there was a resolution prior that could come back with this information now that we know these are the 5 items, because that was the item that we just wanted clarification on. Could that come back for next council meeting? Does that seem like a reasonable timeline? Before that, just Deputy Mayor Lang has a question.
Do we have to pass something? North Glengarry is going to be the one that designates it. It's in North Glengarry. Do we just have to say that we're in support? I'm not sure if we have to have a,
All right, well, we can
maybe
ask
somebody
either,
knows.
Ms. Campo or
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that a resolution is necessary, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, but North Glengarry can proceed with the designation either way, whether we support it or not. I think that by, my understanding is that by expressing opposition to it initially, by way of a letter, that would have given us appeal rights if it did proceed and we were so opposed that we wanted to appeal. So I don't think a resolution in support would hurt. I also don't think it's required for the process. So it would really be council's will if you'd like to send a letter expressing that we no longer oppose it, if that is your feeling. I can bring something back. I can bring the motion back at the next meeting for reconsideration. There's options.
okay, and I saw that you have a comment. If you'd like to go.
I know, yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just reading that I agree, yes, Ms. Campo is correct in her, the next steps in the process. So a formal resolution does not need to be passed. As owners of the property or co-owners, the designation process can continue. It's whether you want to formally object to the Ontario Land Tribunal once that bylaw is passed, but that can only come after it's been adopted by council and within that 30-day appeal period.
Well, I kind of feel that with the extra information, there will be no formal objection coming, I'd imagine. Okay, yeah, so thank you very much for the clarification and coming this evening. It was great to learn a little bit more and very valuable. And it's kind of funny that we recently changed our council meetings because very rarely do we have North Glengarry, South Glengarry council interactions in the same day. And here we are, first year that we did that, and we tied it up at the same time. But thank you very much for your time, and have a good rest of evening.
Thank you.
So our next delegation will be the 2023 Auditor's Report. And I believe Ms. McDonald would like a slight introduction, if I understand properly.
Good evening, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So I'd just like to introduce, I think everyone knows him, but Jamie Pollock here from M&P today to bring the 2023 statements. I'd like to thank council for their patience as we've finally reached this point, and I'm hoping to bring 2024 close on its heels. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pollock?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name in administration, my name is Jamie Pollock. I'm a partner with M&P, Chartered Professional Accountant, and I've been with M&P and the preceding firm of Craig Keane, Dispating Markle for 25 years now, and this is my first time presenting the annual financial statements to council here, and I'm happy to go through them. If there's any questions or concerns, please stop me and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. I'm going to be doing this in about 3 parts. One, a financial overview of your operating results for the year, highlights of our auditor's report, some key financial information, and some recommendations that we came across from the 23 audit that we brought to your administration's attention that hopefully they will be addressed in the near future. The first page we have is a highlight of your financial activities for the year. and we have your analysis of your operating surplus. When we go through your financial statements, it includes your reserves, your reserve funds, your capital fund, but this kind of just pulls out mainly all of your operating fund activities for the year. And if we go to the bottom of the page, you will see, third line from the bottom, a change in your operating fund balance of $813,066, and that's your operating surplus. That includes your water and wastewater systems. The surplus for water and wastewater systems for the year was $33,177, and the remaining portion is your operating surplus for the year of just shy of $780,000. So overall, you had a really good year, and both of those surpluses was placed in its respective reserves according to your rate and bylaw at the end of December 31st, 2023. How did we get to this $813,000? Well, it comes from three main parts. One is under the revenue section. Total revenue raise, actual compared to budget, was $16.1 million, and overage to the good of about $530,000, or 3.4%. Your taxation amounts from PILs was higher, which is payments in lieu, by $123,400. Your building permit revenue was higher than budgeted by $77,000. Grants overall in line with budget, with excess favorable of $58,000, and your interest revenue on your bank accounts, and it was just the way the interest rates fell, was higher in '23, positive $264,000, for total revenue excess of $528,000. Under expenditures, total is $13.6 million. Savings of approximately $600,000 for the year compared to budget, or 4.3%. Some line items was higher than budget, such as general government and protections to persons and property, and that was due to higher salaries and benefits, higher materials and services. However, you had savings in transportation, environmental services, and planning and development, and those savings were materials and services, consultant fees, and lower materials and services as well. So your net revenue for the year, you budgeted $1.4 million, which is the column on the left-hand side. Your actual, the middle, was $2.5 million, just over $1.1 million in excess of net revenue, which was 80% of your budgeted. Now, when we go through your financing transfers and capital, this is where we kind of bring in your capital fund and your reserves and reserve funds. Because of some of the savings, the second line, you end up actually transferring more over to capital reserves due to some savings in operations that you made a deliberate approval to put funds into those reserves. But the timing of capital, about halfway down, you budgeted to spend $4.4 million, but you only end up spending $3.1 million in 2023. So you had savings in capital projects which was simply deferred to 2024. So those savings was $1.2 million, and with that, you didn't need to obtain as much grant revenue that you thought you needed for capital projects of $983,000. You didn't need to take on the debt that you thought you were going to take on in '23 of $346,000, and you took on less reserves or less transfers from reserves to finance that capital work by $279,000. So because of the operating surplus that you had, you used part of that to pay down capital projects in '23 without taking on the debt or requiring the grants from other forms of government, but that's mainly because of timing. And some grants are tied directly to how much you do spend in a particular year. So overall, you had a change to the good of $813,000, which $780,000 was for operating purposes. If we kind of go through, the next part I want to go through is the financial statements. They are in draft format until council accepts them, and so that's why they're in draft form. But we are in the position to sign our auditor's report once they are approved by council. The auditor's report is 2 pages, but I won't go through it all in too much detail, but I'll just go through the first 2 paragraphs. And it is addressed to the members of council, inhabitants and ratepayers of the corporation of the Township of South Glengarry. We have audited the financial statements of the corporation of the township, which comprise the statement of financial position as of December 31st, 23, and the statements of financial activities, net financial assets and cash flows for the year then ended, and notes to the financial statements, including a summary of significant accounting policies. In our opinion, the accompanying financial statements presents fairly in all material respects the financial position of the township as of December 31st, 23, and the results of its operations, net financial assets, and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So it's a clean audit opinion. That's what you want to hear from us as your auditors, that the financial statements as recorded by your municipality throughout the year and recorded in these financial statements are according to Canadian GAAP. If we go to the page where it states the statement of financial position, this is your balance sheet. It is at a particular point in time as of December 31st, 23. Your total assets was 12.9 million compared to 14.5 million, an overall decrease of 1.6 million, and most of that is in the cash balance, but this was planned because most of that decrease in the cash was used to pay down your accounts payable, which is under liabilities. You'll see your liabilities went by 2.1 million down, 4.4 million down to 2.2 million, and the difference between the 1.6 and the 2.1, it's about $500,000, which you use part of your operating surplus this year to help pay down your accounts payable. And that's mainly timing of trade payables from capital work, but it's nice to see your accounts payable went down by almost 50% from one year to the next. In 2023, there was 2 key accounting standard changes, and the one that impacted the township the most was the establishment of the asset retirement obligations. And really, this standard replaced the older accrued landfill closure and post-closure costs accounting standard. So within these financial statements, you'll see a new amount for asset retirement obligations, $5.1 million, whereas the previous standard indicated accrued landfill closure costs of $4,008,000. Now, majority of that $4 million, or all of it, is in that $5.1 million that is presented as of December 31st. The asset retirement obligations does take in more items on top of the landfill closure cost. That's anything to do with an asset you might have to retire. So another example, it could be related to quarries, to pits, to forestry. And another example that was common, while it might not be a liability today, but there could be some buildings with asbestos in it, and then that asbestos will have to be removed eventually. So this new accounting standard kind of takes in what will be the future costs of removing those asbestos costs. Now, I'll go in a little bit more detail later on the 5.1 million, but I just want to show you that that's the big change on your financial position statement for the year. So your net financial assets was 4.9 million compared to 5.5 million, a decrease of $576,000. If we did not have that change to AROs, that's the short form for asset retirement obligations, your net financial assets would have gone up by $602,000 for the year. So while you might see a decrease in financial assets, it's due because of the accounting change, and it's really a non-cash item that made that change in the year on the net financial assets. So your overall accumulated surplus is 64.9 million compared to 64.2 million, an increase of 794,000 or 1.2% in the year. If we go to the statement of financial activities, this is very similar to the one-page summary that we went through earlier, so I won't go through much details, but this is recorded for accounting for PSAS purposes. So instead of showing, and it's interesting that it's quite close, overall, the surplus for the year under PSAS was $794,000, where overall we presented a surplus very close of $780,000. But that's just coincidence that they're about the same. Because what's not on these financial statements, which is on the next page, is the payment of capital items. And as you look, it's about the middle of the page. Is everyone doing all right? I haven't lost anyone yet, but I'm good to do that. So you budgeted to spend 4.3, but you only spent 3.1. So you don't see actually the transfers to reserves or the transfers from reserves. You just see the capital items, and we add back the amortization expense, which is a non-cash item of $3 million. And then you see the change because of AROs relating to tangible capital assets. We had to increase your capital assets by $1.3 million. I won't get through the mechanics, but a non-cash item to adjust the capital assets accordingly, which brings to your overall decrease in your net financial assets of $777,000. But if you kind of go right back, your overall change for the surplus is $780, and that's the more important number on this statement. This is the statement of cash flows. While your surplus is $794,000, and we add back all the non-cash items, you had a cash flow of $3.6 million, which you used 2.1 to pay down your accounts payable, and you used 3.1 million to use to purchase tangible capital assets without taking on any long-term debt. So your overall decrease in your cash balance is 1.5 million for a closing balance of 7.3 million at the end of the year. I will go through some ratios in a few minutes, but you're still quite financially healthy with the ending cash balance of $7.3 million for the municipality. The next page is the schedule of tangible capital assets. And of course, it's broken down by key assets as land, buildings, vehicles, plants and facilities, roads, water and wastewater, bridges. So your total cost, which is for accounting purposes only, historically $128 million. We've recorded amortization to date of $69 million for a net book value of $59.4 million, increase of almost $1.5 million from the previous year. This net book value is recorded for accounting purposes, so it's not necessarily your replacement value or your fair market value of your assets. It's whatever you purchase those assets over, the life of the municipality even before the 98 amalgamation, less accumulated amortization. This $59.4 million represents 46% of your total net book, total costs, and we always like to see that around 50% or higher, so you're just slightly below what we expect to see your percentage of net book value to your total assets, which just represents that you've utilized about half of your assets' useful life, and you always want to be around 50. That means that you always keep adding into your infrastructure system as you amortize those assets, as you use them. Yes. Through you,
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Does not the land and buildings throw that way off? If we're depreciating them and in reality they're going up?
Yes, so this is based on historical costs, so you're correct that, and we're amortizing over its useful life. And once we get close to its useful life, we can kind of estimate if that's the right accumulated amortization, but buildings have always been amortized. So it does throw off the reality of what your buildings are that you do use, but we have to record it according to accounting policies. So that's a good point to make. The next page is just similar. The final numbers are the same. It's just presented by major department, and not surprising that most of your assets is under the transportation or the roads department, and the remain in environmental for your water and wastewater systems, and health and recreation. This page breaks down the schedule of the accumulated surplus. In the middle part is your reserves, and the reserves at the end of December 31st, 23. Just hold on. It's $10.5 million compared to $9.9 million, an increase of $633,000 or 6.4%. The year-end surplus for operations of $780,000 was placed right back into your working capital reserve, so that is why that is up by almost $700,000. Waste management reserve, there has been no change. Roads, a little bit of an increase, but you didn't have to draw down as much as you had budgeted for capital work, and your sewer and water reserves went up slightly due to its surplus in the year from your different operating systems. With the change in the ARO, you now have an operating closing surplus of $122,000 due to your streetlight surplus position. The landfill closure and post-closure costs, unfunded liability now goes to under assets. So it just goes from one point over to the other. So now you have a lower amount in equity and tangible capital assets, but that's kind of accounting treatment. Your reserves are the most important part of this schedule, and your accumulated surplus that ties back to the statement of financial position is $64.9 million. But yes, through you, Mr. Mayor.
I have a question in regards to reserves. At one time, there was, I guess, a percentage of reserves compared to capital. Is there a certain kind of percentage that is, I guess, qualified as a healthy percentage in a reserves? Like, are we in a healthy reserve position, in your opinion, I guess is the question?
Yes, so yes, you are in a very healthy position when it comes to reserves. We always like to see the amount from 25 to 50% of your operating expenditures amount in reserves. So when you look at your current year operating expenditures, which is about 16.6 million, you're actually at 62%. So you're over that threshold. You were higher a few years ago, but you've been utilizing your reserves for your capital projects, but you're still in very good financial shape because of your health of your reserves. So I have no qualms of why your reserves balance being that healthy at 62%. If you want to focus just on your working capital ratio, working capital, we always like to see that between 10 and 15% of your operating expenditures. And at the end of the year, that percentage is 20%, which has gone up by 4% from the previous year. So you have a healthy amount of working capital reserves, which are, reserves not designated for any particular purposes, but they're, to help fund any unexpected expenditures that the municipality might face. And that's quite healthy also at December 31st, 23. Just going through the rest of the financial statements, I can go through this paragraph by paragraph, but I think everyone wants a good night's sleep. So I'll just, unless you want to read them and have a good night's sleep, but I don't think anyone wants to stay here too late. So we have the breakdown of cash between what's operating and what's required for your reserve funds, breakdown in Note 3. Note 4 breaks down the taxes receivable. I've made a management recommendation letter. You will see the taxes have grown by almost $300,000 from 22 to 23. Your deferred revenue obligatory reserve funds, so these have to be presented as deferred revenue. Yes, you do call them reserve funds, but they are basically reserve funds with strings attached. And you have an unspent balance of those funds of $560,000 at the end of the year. with 114,000 still in unspent gas tax funds, and they call it the Canada Community Building Fund now. You have 88,000 in parkland and 354,000 in your development charges reserve fund to be spent for future use on capital. And you're almost utilized all your COVID-19 funds by the end of '23. Long-term debt, it's really not your long-term debt, it's the tile drains. You are kind of co-signers on it, so the funds are funded by the benefit landowners who have the tile drains, and that's the only long-term debt that you have on these financial statements. So the asset retirement obligations, as indicated, takes really over from the landfill closure, post-closure costs. And instead of presenting those costs based on usage, which at the start of the fiscal year was $4,008,000, it has to be adjusted to what will cost to close all the landfill sites, the whole site, not based on usage. So now that liability has been adjusted to $5.1 million based on the remaining useful lives of the landfill sites for both North Lancaster and Beaverbrook landfill sites. And it was just mentioned to me that I might have indicated 8 years for North Lancaster, but it should be 12.5% years, but it doesn't change the amounts because it's all recorded in today's dollars, you know. But having an extended useful life is beneficial for the municipality because that's just another 4.5 years that you don't have to spend money till that point. So, and then of course we have to record that landfill site each year based on the rate of inflation, and you see that amount $62,000. So at the end of December 31st, it's an estimate, but we estimate that the cost to close and monitor the landfill sites of its full 100% capacity, well, not capacity, but the reverse, zero capacity, you know, of the landfill site is $5.2 million in today's dollars over the next, 30 years of what that landfill liability is. Yes.
Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. Thank you, Mr. Pollack, for explaining now that we know that our landfill is slightly extended at North Lancaster, but that it doesn't really affect the number that would be listed here in the AROs. But I do have a question, if you could provide a bit more detail on how that estimate is developed, please.
So it does come from various factors. So one, of course, is the remaining useful life of those landfill sites. Second is the post-monitoring period, which is usually 25 years. You have your capping costs of what it will take to close both landfill sites in today's dollars, and you're looking at maybe 1.2 to 1.5 million to close those landfill sites in today's dollars, and the annual monitoring costs over those 25 years, which you have to discount back into today's dollars. So if you know it costs, just say $50,000 today, how much it's going to cost over 25 years, starting in 2040, and then discount it all the way back to today's dollars using a discount rate, which will be mainly your rate of borrowing, which you don't have any debt, but it'd be close to what you would have take on in debt, equal to like any Ontario infrastructure grant. So we use a discount rate of 3%. And so it's discounted into today's dollars. Now this, I did indicate it's an estimate. So every year we will look at this balance. Is there a change in the inflation rate? Is there a change in the discount rate or borrowing rate? And the costs to close those landfill sites, are they going to change, And we know it could easily change, unfortunately. And then what's the annual monitoring costs are going to be? Is that going to be what we think it is in today's dollars of I'll say $25,000 per year per landfill site, or is that going to change? So every year your administration will have to look at it, and probably every 3 to 5 years get formal third-party evaluation reports from engineers to say, okay, yes, it is still going to cost this much to close those landfill sites. And of course, as you indicated, the amount of remaining life will determine if those costs are going to be incurred quicker or not. So there's a lot of factors that comes into play, but the main change from one year to the next is not based on capacity used, but based on the full usage of the landfill site. So now it jumped up to $5.2 million of what could cost the municipalities to close your landfill sites and monitoring them for 25 years. So the amounts to be recovered is really liabilities, which is your asset retirement obligations, and how it's going to, at this current time, how that's going to be funded, with majority of that's coming from future general municipal revenues. You do have reserves and reserve funds in place with your waste management reserve, about $1,096,000, and the $17,000 for the tile drains is from benefit landowners. Note 10 is just a breakdown of expenditures by object. You'll see it wages and benefits, third-party transfers, materials and services. So the savings on materials and services about $400,000, which really led to your surplus for the year, plus contracted services was a surplus there of $200,000. And the last line, amortization, non-cash item, you're over by $300,000, which is reflected in the main statements, but I excluded that when we went through our one-page summary, and when you exclude that, you're actually quite below your actual expenses compared to budget for the year. So if I just go to maybe the last part, we have a 5-year financial review as part of the financial statements, and you can, to me, it provides really interesting information where the amount of revenues over the 5 years have gone from like just under 15 million to 16.1 million. Your expenditures have grown from 13 million, up to $16 million. And your net surplus for the year, 2.2 up to 7, down to 794. But most of that could be due to amortization expense and what sort of capital revenue you receive for capital projects, and they fluctuate from each year. Property taxes raised. If you look over the 5-year period for your own purposes, it grew on an annualized basis of 2.3%, from 2019 to 2023. Taxable assessment itself grew by 5.3% when you look at 2019 to 2023. And not surprising, but commercial industrial property assessment values in comparison to everything else that the municipality has decreases each year. So unfortunately, the commercial industrial is not growing in the same rate as, residential and farmland properties are growing. And they're taking a lesser share of the assessment value, which results really in lesser revenues coming from that class. Going through some of the financial ratios, there's 2 key ratios I want to bring your attention to. One is the percentage of tax arrears to your own levy. It's 32%, but it was as high as 44% during COVID at the end of 2020. When you look at your total levy, it's 13% compared to 17%. But these percentage, unfortunately, is higher than some of your neighboring municipalities. And I have a management letter recommendation that these tax arrears, your administration should focus on them, look at the collection policies. A lot of the properties that are 2 years and older are in the position that they should be registered, and this will help, hopefully speed up the collection process. And if you can do that, that will bring in extra cash flow for the municipality. The other percentages, and we kind of just went through them, the amount of your reserves, 10.5 million, which works out to 63%. At one time, you were like close to 100% of your operating expenditures, but you have been using your reserves for capital projects, but it's still quite healthy at 63%. And your working capital reserves, it was 3.5 million, but it's now 3.3 million, and still quite healthy at 20% compared to your overall operating expenses. So you actually had a very good year. Your financial ratios, for the most part, you're very healthy. You're in a good, strong cash position. You had a surplus of $780,000, $779,889 to be specific. That was placed into your working capital reserve, and we are in a position to issue a clean audit opinion on these financial statements.
Thank you very much for that. It's always exciting seeing our come back in a positive statement, and clean audit opinion is very valuable even for grant or formula-based or application-based. I have just a question. I think I asked you previously, just now that we're working on getting through and catching up, would you have an anticipated date to return with 2024 numbers?
So we've already started the year-end audit for '24. We were at your office last week undertaking the audit. We're still taking on the audit this week. I'm expecting to present the '24 draft financial statements sometime in the new year, likely in January of '26, to present the '24 financial statements. And then with 2025, we'll be back on schedule to undertake the audit in the springtime and present them probably in midsummer on those financial statements.
Excellent. It's nice to hear that we're going to be caught up. That was a big priority for council, so thank you. And thank you. Any questions or comments from council present? Okay. I imagine as we go into budget with that larger than normal surplus, we'll have conversations about, because we can, I think our bylaw says go into working reserves, but there could be some interest, at least for me, to see, because that can be applied as council wishes too. So we'll see how that comes through the budget as well.
Don't hold me to it, but I'm put some pressure on myself. I can probably come back through your administration of kind of a ballpark number of where your '24 will be. You know, we might know what that number could be by the end of this month or early next week.
Okay, that would be wonderful, given that I think we have budget the 2nd for counties, the 4th for RRCA, and the 5th for local. So it's budget week next week, but that would be wonderful if we have that information, because it would be, for us as, I guess, legislative branch, is a good number to know what we're starting off next year with, for probably the first time in a little bit. So if you can, glad to receive it. I'm sure Ms. MacDonald would also be glad to have a clear number coming through, even if it's a little bit more work. So no comments or questions I've seen, so thank you very much for this. This is wonderful news, and I guess we look forward to seeing you in 2 months' time, plus or minus.
Yeah. And I'd like to say a big thanks to your administration staff and to your treasurer, Kaylin McDonald, very cooperative, and her team, and with Jamie and their team as well. And we're happy to be here to go through these financial statements, and I know it's a lot of work for Kaylin, and but it was a pleasure working with them, and we're continuing working with them, and thank you very much for the reappointment back us as auditors. I know it was sad that we weren't here, I'll say, for your '22 fiscal year, but we're happy to be back going forward with your '23 and '24 financial statement audit. So thank you.
Well, very welcome, and glad to have it done so quickly. We do have a motion to receive and accept these audit papers, should council wish. Okay, and that can allow us to close year end on our side administratively. So moved by Councillor Bougie, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that Council of the Township of South Glengarry receive and accept the 2023 audited financial statements prepared by MNP LLP. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and everyone enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks.
Okay. So now we will move into action request 2025 accessibility annual status update. It will be presented by Ms. Campo. Moved by Councillor Bougie, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that staff report 2025-125 be received, and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry receive and accept the 2025 accessibility plan annual update report. Mrs. Campo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, if it's all right with yourself and council, I would like to speak to this report and the subsequent report at the same time, as they're fairly interconnected. So I can speak to both and answer any questions, and then if you, we can pass the resolution and read the second one if you're all right with that. Perfect. Okay, so I will start with the first report that's before you this evening, and this is our annual accessibility status update. This is a report that council receives annually, and it's a summary of the actions that have occurred throughout the year with regards to our multi-year accessibility plan. So our current multi-year accessibility plan comes to an end at the end of this year. It was for the period 2020 to 2025. So this is the final report in that span for the multi-year report. This report was presented to the SDG Accessibility Committee. That committee is made up of one representative from each lower tier in SDNG, and the committee did accept and approve the 2025 update with very little comment. They were relatively pleased with the work that's been completed to date, and they did recommend that it come to council for final approval. Once approved, this report is added to our website in accordance with the AOTA legislation, and that will conclude our 2020 to 2025 multi-year plan. I did receive a question and comment from Councillor Jaworski, and I think it does hold some good merit. So I will make this suggestion, and it did come through Councillor Jaworski, which is in our 2020 to 2025 multi-year plan, we had have a facilities implementation plan that lists out all of our facilities and the work that had been identified to be completed for the facilities within the 5-year period of the plan. That implementation plan was purposefully not included in the 2025 update, mainly because of the intent in our next multi-year plan, which I'll speak to momentarily, to complete a new audit. So it wasn't included in the 2025 report because we're looking at completing a new facilities implementation plan. That said, Councillor Jaworski did make a very valid point in that it would be nice to include it regardless as an appendix to the 2025 report to demonstrate all the work that has been completed over the 5-year period of the plan. So even if there aren't a lot of updates in terms of what was achieved this year in that facilities plan, we still do highlight the things that have been completed, and so it would demonstrate all of the work that had been completed over that 5-year plan. So I'm certainly not opposed to adding it, so long as there's a consensus from council that you're okay with that addition post passing the resolution in the meeting. So that summarizes the 2025 report. The second report that's before you is a draft new multi-year plan. That plan is for the period from 2026 to 2030. It's a new look, updated look compared to our previous multi-year plan. This plan was also reviewed by the Accessibility Committee. Their only comment or question on the plan was regarding the proposed facility audit that's going to take place. And they had asked, who would be involved in preparing that facilities plan, whether it would be an external consultant or who would be involved in providing input. Our intent, and Ms. Harbers isn't here this evening, but that will be a project that will jointly be led by myself and Ms. Harbers, and it will involve input from staff who are familiar with the facilities. We will be engaging the Accessibility Committee in that process because it is very important to gain comment from the folks who are experiencing various disabilities and their perspective on how we can make improvements to our public spaces. So we will be engaging the committee on that process, and we haven't quite gotten down the road of fully planning out that project yet, but there could always be a community consultation component as well, because that certainly is a principle in AOTA and is engaging persons with disabilities in the development of plans and improvements related to accessibility. So outside of that comment, the Accessibility Committee was favorable to our proposed plan, and they also recommended that it come forward to council for approval. So that is the second report that's before you this evening. And I would say the largest component going into this next 5-year period will be that updated facilities review and identifying any barriers that are currently existing that we'll need to address. So subject to any comments or questions of council, those are the two reports before you this evening.
And just procedurally, it's okay if that addendum kind of be, or that Councillor Jaworski added, this motion is acceptable, or would you like to? As amended. Okay. Any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I'm fully in favor of adding the facilities. I think we were receiving it every year throughout this 5-year plan, because I remember reading it every other year, and I think was thinking that we would be very close by the end of this year to getting most of those things done that we had listed there, because we were close last year. And if we do a new one, it's going to be attached, I assume, as an amendment to the new plan, I would hope, and then we get to go through every year and just kind of see what those things are. And if there is the ability, I do think it would be great to have input from, definitely the Accessibility Committee, but maybe from council, maybe from the public, just things that maybe people might think of that we might not, or staff might not. So, like people that are hard of hearing, it is difficult when you hear a hockey game in the background to hear right in this meeting at the moment.
And without being hard of hearing, but having done a meeting where the microphone picks up everything, even the click of a pen, it is an experience that I can't imagine. So you were very right, as you said, like that sounds the same as my voice at times, because there's no differentiation. And I'd encourage anybody who hasn't experienced that to just take a meeting where they hear the whole time, because people are clicking their pens. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. I just wanted to thank all of administration and Ms. Campo for putting this together, and all the progress that's been made. And and that was, like the main intent of my comment about adding in that facilities document is like, I think it's a really good way of just showing how much work has been done. And I think it's also a great record, just of the plan and where we landed, and, sets us off following that same kind of process for the next time, to be able to follow along, and again, just keep us all accountable to moving forward, just like we did so well this last time. And I'm also in favor with having consultation on this, because sometimes it's as much as the accessibility committee at SDG level, I'm sure excellent committee, it puts together a lot of good input. Again, sometimes getting some more diverse voices too. Sometimes we learn some new things too. So thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions or comments, I'll just read it again as it says amended. So moved by Councillor Bougie, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that Staff Report 2025-125 be received, and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry receive and accept the 2025 Accessibility Plan Annual Report as amended. All those in favor? Carried. And as it was spoken to, I'll read the resolution and call the vote unless there's any further questions on the multi-year accessibility plan. Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that Staff Report 2025-126 be received, and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry receive and adopt the 2026 to 2030 multi-year accessibility plan. All those in favor? Carried. All right, as there were no items pulled from consent agenda, moved by Councillor Bougie, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. Be it resolved that Council accepts the items listed on the consent agenda. All those in favor? Carried. All right, board and committee updates. I believe there was a county council meeting in between our meetings last week. Would you like to speak to it, or I can if you're... Please do, Deputy
I
Mayor
didn't
Lang.
really make any notes or get ready to speak to it. If you have anything, go for it.
All right. Well, I just pull up the agenda every time I'm doing it. I don't think it was there was a ton update on County Road 22. Reconstruction was a fairly hefty one. A large portion of that cost, as we previously discussed, was because of the hydro pole moving, but it came well under budget. I kind of, without looking at it, I believe it was $1 million something under budget, which is wonderful because a little bit of context would be, there used to be a Now Needs program. There were some staff hired to make sure that we could expend the money we were giving them. So the Now Needs roads, which just like surplus, that doesn't exist as much as it used to because now we have the capacity to do the things we said we were going to do. So this was kind of the last road that's for sure going to get done from that fund. And there was thought towards debt, and it's looking like we might be able to avoid that at the county level. Cost sharing for Alvin Runnels Forest, that was, well, if you want to speak about that one, because you probably were part of the negotiations or comments.
I'm happy to speak about it. North Dundas, I guess, go back a little bit. We had, in conversation, had said that possibly, you know, because it was owned by the counties, the forest, and it was a significant expense for North Dundas, that we would be willing to help them out. So they've approached us and asked for a nominal amount, 50,000-ish, if I remember the number correctly, which would cover staff time and the excavators that were needed to bring in. So, which I thought was very fair, and I mean, more than happy. I think nobody had any objection. We're more than happy to help them out with that. Their expenses will be quite a bit more than that, but that was good on our part, I think.
And there was also a delegation from Alto, the high-speed rail, that's looking to go Quebec City, Laval, Laval, Montreal, Montreal, Ottawa, Ottawa, Peterborough, Peterborough, Toronto, as it's going through particularly North Glengarry and North Stormont. It has to be a straighter line. They're still at the development phase, and some comments on that were that I think the general, if you read the newspaper, it's pretty, generally we don't see much benefit to the rural municipalities as that line, people are worried that it could remove a line, and if Montreal to Ottawa, you miss Alexandria, Castleman as touch points, and it might affect rail that way, and they're hoping that there will be nodules, like, you know, you go from Cornwall to Ottawa to get on it fast, but they're really looking at that corridor. I think they said 60% of the population lives along that way. But yeah, if anything further?
Could I just add in that there was a presentation and a fair amount of discussion about the roadside tree planting, and we had submitted a resolution from this council to, which I think that, like, it said to halt, but I mean it's been done for the year for a little bit of time now. But it looks like we're going to have maybe in January have the opportunity for some consultation with the farm community and maybe other people that have some interest in it. So that's what I would like to see, is a consultation there to make sure we're looking at all sides of it, and then county council will make a decision and move forward from there.
All right, is there any further committees that had met? All right. Then moving to support resolutions, Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. It was moved by Councillor Jaworski, a seconder at this table. Go to Councillor Bougie. I have to write extra slowly here because this goes on another council meeting, and as I said one time, my signature was very poor on the last one, so now when it's a support resolution, I try to make sure my writing is clear. So moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry hereby supports the resolution passed by the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal on September 29th, 2025, attached here to, and calls upon the Government of Ontario to extend the annual OSIF envelope at not less than $400 million beyond its current 5-year term ending in 2026, with no reductions in subsequent provincial budgets. And furthermore, that this resolution be forwarded to the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of Infrastructure, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Minister of Finance, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal. Did you wish further to speak? Okay. All those in favor? Carried. And we do have another support resolution. This one's for Ontario Airport Capital Assistance Program. It was moved by Deputy Mayor Lang, seconder. Okay, go to Councillor Bougie. So moved by Deputy Mayor Lang, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry supports the resolution passed by the City of Brantford on October 28, 2025, attached hereto. and that Council of the Township of South Glengarry urges the Government of Ontario to implement the Ontario Airport Capital Assistance Program managed by the Ministry of Transportation and to adopt the additional recommendations put forward by the City of Brantford. And furthermore, that this resolution be forwarded to the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of Transportation, MPP Nolan Quinn, and the City of Brantford. Do you wish to speak further? All those in favor of the motion? Carried. And before I get ahead of myself, you might notice somebody sitting behind Councillor Jaworski and Deputy Mayor Lang, new to our office, not new to the community being SDNG. Just make sure you might want to say something, but welcome to David Kuhn. He was formerly a City of the Cornwall employee. He will be taking over as our General Manager of Infrastructure. So I'll start with just a classic welcome to the municipality through a show of hands. And I'll leave it to you if you want to say anything, as you've had a few meetings, I'm sure.
Oh, well, I'll keep it brief, but no, we're very happy to have Mr. Kuhn on board of the team. He's been a great addition, and his expertise, particularly in environmental services, will be really round out our team quite well. So we're very happy to have him.
Take a cheeky moment to say he might even enjoy going to the Environment Committee. All right. So then we'll move into closed session. Moved by Deputy Mayor Lang, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. Be it resolved that Council convene to closed session at 7:49 p.m. to discuss the following items under Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act SO 2001. 2, a meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered is D, labor relations or employee negotiations, specifically organizational structure, and D, labor relations or employee negotiations, specifically a staffing matter. All those in favor? Carried. We'll be going to closed session. So we're coming out of closed session, moved by Deputy Mayor Lang, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that council rise and reconvene into open session at 8:53 PM without reporting. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that administration be directed to carry out all actions as specified in the closed session minutes. All those in favor? Carried. Confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor Bougie, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. Be it resolved that bylaw 2025-67, being a bylaw to adopt, confirm, ratify matters be dealt with, confirm and ratify matters dealt with by resolution be read a first, second, and third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council this 24th day of November 2025. All those in favor? Carried. Before adjournment, is there anything that you wish to share with the community or with council? Oh yeah, Giving Tuesday is coming up to celebrate our volunteers next Tuesday, I believe, or maybe next Tuesday. Excellent. So hope to see you there. It will be at the Legion for Giving Tuesday. Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Bougie. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry adjourn to the call of the chair at 8:54 PM. All those in favor? Carried. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you.